Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. How we doing?
Hey, everybody, doing well.
Good, good. We'll just give a couple minutes here for everybody to pop on, and then we could get started. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Give it another minute. We'll start. Ryan, you got your water and your coffee. You're all set.
Oh, I do. They're never too far from me.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll
Especially,
kick this off. Thank you, everybody, for taking the opportunity this morning, afternoon, depending on where you're located. My name is Michael Ubaldini here at STS. We're going to be talking about document management systems and best practices when you would like to implement them. For law firms, obviously, we are a managed services and IT company for law firms specifically. And I'm going to hand it over off to Ryan to kind of get involved. This is very open, so please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, throw a question in the chat if you want. Very, very informal. So we would just want to make sure that those that are attending have the ability to get out as much as possible. So if we're going too fast, let us know. If we're going too slow, let us know. But also feel free to engage as you see fit. So with that said, Ryan, I'll hand it over to you.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate you. A little bit about me for those of you who don't know me. I am Ryan Whitworth. I've spent nearly 20 years in the IT field to date. Most of that, over 17 years, has been in the legal technology sector. Um, uh, for most of my career, I've been behind the screen and not on it, so please forgive me if I run out of breath or my voice gets a little shaky. In my career, I've climbed from support roles to engineering. I've done some design and consulting. Um, and really, I've been driven by a relentless pursuit of understanding and growth. I've really wanted to attain a level of competence and integrity that you really only see in Star Trek or media. And during this time, I was able to successfully migrate millions of critical legal documents, automate billing systems, quoting systems, matter intake processes, OCR, and maintenance processes. I've documented complex workflows. I've empowered professionals to optimize their systems and facilitated improvements for clients. Um, I've also ordered flowers, performed wake-up calls, and covered a reception desk, but that normally doesn't make it to my cover letter. Uh, so today, my goal is really to ignite your curiosity and foster an understanding between us professionals who have really varying different daily responsibilities, but the same goals. Um, I'd like to embark on this journey together. And as we go through, you might find that we're covering topics that you don't deal with every day. And some of this is going to be new. And if that makes you a little nervous and afraid of misspeaking or sounding a little silly, me too. Uh, you're not alone. Um, so we want to show grace to people who find the courage to ask questions and speak up, and know that we're all there at some point or on some topic. Um, all right, without further ado, let's get right into it. First, we're going to go over what matter centricity is. And this is really a core concept to organizing a DMS system. It's a fancy way to say, that the library is organized by a matter. Um, when I first entered the legal field at 18, I joined a statewide law office. And I remember walking through the hallways and seeing these filing cabinets, just literal tons of them lining the walls. Everywhere I went, they were stuffed in these corners. And if you opened them up, they were filled with like rust-colored accordion um, envelopes or folders that they called colloquially red wells, and they held everything related to a case. There were pleadings, and they were organized by the client name or their initials or some weird number I didn't understand at the time. And when a deadline was approaching, I remember, paralegals and clerks and associates opening all those drawers and grabbing the contents, putting them into banker boxes, and marching them into these war rooms, these big glass fish bowls, where people would sit down and pull out those documents and pour through them on paper physically. Um, and now that may still happen, but today we've really condensed that logic into a digital space. So in iManage, they call that big cabinet a library. And in Net Documents, they call it a repository. Uh, my colleagues and myself won't stop calling it a database, but the concept remains the same. The digital file cabinets really hold those matter-specific workspaces, and your search is still going to lead you to those red wells where all the documents reside. It's only this time we call them a workspace. Um, and within them, you'll find those same manila folders holding those letters or pleadings or other agreements. Um, they're just going to be the digital representation of that physical system. And this is why we want a digital system to be tailored to the people who are using it to mirror their professional focus, right? Much of an attorney's or legal professional's day is organized around a matter, a specific case that's related to a client of theirs. And if their day-to-day is organized around matters, helping them get along and be productive in their task, their system should be as well. Another benefit of a matter-centric configuration is that it simplifies access. So it removes guesswork. You don't have to, you can, but you don't have to create a bunch of specific rules for an organized, overarching system that doesn't correspond with your day-to-day work. You can specify who gets access to the matter based on that matter itself, if they are working on that client, if they're not. And then lastly, it follows that real world logic that a legal professional has been using for their career. And that is, you've got your cabinet, you've got your red wells, you've got your folders, and each document within. I know that that's kind of the groundwork. Any questions or comments before I move on? Right. So in this case, let's look at the life of a matter. So we're going to start at the intake and move on to the profile. The intake process, it really marks the beginning of a matter's life cycle. It shapes the entire trajectory of a workspace of a matter and sometimes of a client's first experience with the firm. It's usually viewed as an administrative task, and I feel like its automation is really critical for efficiency and for the accuracy of the life of the matter. What we've found is that manual entry here really does take a lot of time and introduce a lot of risk, and for a couple of reasons, really. One is field blindness. It happens to everybody. I think it's a consequence of human nature, biology. When you look at something, the same thing, day in and day out, eventually it moves to your peripherals and then you stop seeing it. Um, so what really happens here is you go to the same web page, there's a banner ad you've seen a million times before. When you go to that web page, you don't notice the ad anymore. And that concept is the same for a document. If you're used to looking through one text file with a bunch of fields, and each one has a default value associated with it, like a case name or a case description, for example, and it's easy to miss that and skip over that field, create a new field, and that introduces sometimes some duplicate entries, or it makes that workspace or client harder to find. Additionally, when a crucial data field is ignored, uh, chaos really gets introduced because then you've got to reach out to a tech representative to help you fix that problem. If an item was saved to that workspace with the wrong name or the wrong number, you have to migrate that data to or move that data to a new workspace. And it can also lead to duplicate workspaces for the same matter. Simplification of this process and consistent documentation for how to go about your matter intake is really key to prevent the field blindness, choice paralysis, and to ensure uniformity and a streamlined intake profile. One thing that that we've also seen is that this is an opportunity to align your profile metadata and to make sure that you're capturing your practice areas if you can. It's an opportunity to create personalized templates and profiles of different folder structures per each practice area. So if you have a real estate department, their needs are largely different than a litigation in most cases, and they're going to want a different set of folders to save things. In this case, you can introduce during the matter intake a practice area field and fill that in to your automation when you're opening a new matter. So if we are staying manual, simplification is really important. Trimming down the amount of data that needs to be manually entered and having that documented to a process can ensure that it's consistent and easy to catch before you hit save and send. Well, another thing we want to do where I've seen is sometimes firms on the matter intake form, they'll have a PDF and they'll have the partner or the attorney who's opening that new client or opening that new matter at the request of the client, circle different numbers, 172, 173, and then that goes over to an administrative person or an IT engineer. They'll go through that and have to line up that number with its real world equivalent based on a separate document. And generally when I've seen that, that adds time and risk into the intake process and can slow it down. So is this an effective use of our time? Intake is important, it's vital, and a lot of the times it's the first interaction that a client may have with you as a firm. So I do think that documenting this and having that process and investing in your automation for your intake flow and your templates is an effective use of your time. It's going to reduce the amount of I want to say recidivism, but that's not the right word. It's going to reduce the amount of wasted time essentially when an attorney submits a matter intake before they can start saving and working on those documents and billing to it. No, I know this is a big one. I won't ask after every slide, but if you have questions, feel free. So let's go into document profiling. So what is a document profile? Really, this is a collection of metadata that is associated with the document. Now, metadata is just data that explains other data. So if you have a document, that contains your attorney work product or your client information. And if we want to know specific things about that document, we look at the metadata, such as who is the author, when was it last edited, and who is it for? So whether it's NetDocuments, iManage, OpenText, Hummingbird DM, or another one, it's generally going to have a profile associated with that document that includes all these different types of metadata. Stuff like client and matter numbers or descriptions, their jurisdiction, like what the practice area is, who authored it, who's the operator who's editing that. And all of this comes together to help you search and retrieve those files in the system. Metadata organizes those documents and really makes them come up just like a hashtag when you search, a social media site. You can go through and say, I need every agreement, which is for litigation that was authored by, named partner one. And that should, if you're organized correctly with your agreements, bring that up to you. You can also have subtypes underneath agreements if you wanted to, you know, um, or underneath letters if you wanted to make a memo or another type of um, classification for documents that you frequently author and need them to be recalled pretty quickly. So what type of risk are we trying to prevent by creating policies and procedures around document profiling? Problems can really arise when the metadata is inconsistent or it's too general, right? So if you have a metadata type, and most people do, it's a default type, that's just doc. And in there you could find all sorts of documents. Um, but you have that set as the default for every single folder in your template, then that metadata starts to become meaningless. If you can find letters, memos, agreements, appeals, pleadings in your document metadata tag, and if it's returning PDFs, if it's returning emails, it's no longer usable to find a document. And that logic is the same for other items. If you're mixing a tag with client-produced documents versus in-house documents, if you're looking specifically for work product, you're going to have to do a lot more manual filtering of your search results in order to come to the destination and find that file that you need. So, a lot of firms will have a client-produced metadata tag, or even a disco, like a discovery tag. And it's important that when we're filing these items and creating those templates that we really understand and can train new users and existing users on what they mean and what that metadata means and what it's intended for. An anecdote here, I had a migration of about 4 million documents for a firm, and they had a very meticulous organization of their document profiles. Inside of it, they had a general memo, a general lit memo, all as a class. They had a general non-lit memo, and they had um, a I think it was lit memo, but all of these were a Gen AF memo. And all of these were presented as a top level class. So when a user saved a memo, they had to go through and consistently select whether it was a gen, a lit, a non-lit, or an AF. And what we saw, a gen AF, and what we saw was a lot of them put them in the wrong place consistently. Or each attorney had a different idea, or professional had a different idea of what type of document goes into which field, which caused confusion. So it caused the legal assistants and paralegals who were working on those cases to really have to know what the attorney intended when they saved the document, to know how they worked, to generalize and create a rapport. And understand how their assigned attorney thinks. And that means training time is tough. Documentation of that process gets tougher. And finding documents gets a lot more difficult to do. It also creates choice paralysis as users go to save a memo and they look through 5 different memo fields, each one having a similar counterpart. They may sit there and stare at it for a few minutes wondering, what do I do? they may call another person and bring them in. And all of this is time that could have been avoided, non-billable time that could have been avoided, if that system worked for them and their daily workflows. And how it goes wrong essentially. So we talked a bit about having items that were too general or too specific and having duplicate items. It's also a risk if we have inconsistencies in that metadata. In your billing system, if you have it set up as a 998 matter, it gets opened in iManage or Net Documents as 01998, then it's going to be harder to find and place that document if you're used to searching by that initial number in your billing system. Or if you're looking at a document, an intake form, to answer your question of what is the number associated with this matter, and you go to your DMS system and you can't find it with the same number. Again, descriptions are susceptible to this same issue. If you have Credit Suisse as one of your clients, and someone abbreviated on the matter intake form to save time as cred sus, and that made its way to the import process. Then when you search for Credit Suisse, you're missing that I after the U, and it's probably not going to come up in that situation. So definitely inconsistencies can be introduced by a manual or by having a matter intake process or a client intake process, which doesn't quite fit the workflow that your staff is accustomed to or trained on. Automation is a good way to really streamline that effect. Another item that we did cover, that items that could be too general or too specific. What we want to get into is disorganized containers. So when you have a general template, I do have a firm I worked with recently to cut down their template from 60 folders in their general template into 3 different templates for different practice areas, and their general got down to about 18, I want to say. Which I feel is still a little bit long, but it is standard. We get there. Each firm is going to have their own kind of workflows, and we want to make sure that those are still met. Now, when you allow users to create their own top level folders is when you get into some kind of trouble here. A lot of the times, they're not aware that the metadata, such as an agreement, is created at the same time that the folder in the template is created, and aren't able to set that option themselves. So it could add some time when users save documents to that folder and then have to select that metadata. And they may also end up selecting the wrong profile metadata there if we don't have it streamlined and we don't have them trained on how to organize their documents and how the system can work with them. In this case, you may also find documents that are commingled, some that originated in-house versus externally, and creating a subfolder under agreements, such as client produced documents, or creating a separate class can help really organize that. Smaller firms especially don't have, we find, don't always have a big discovery solution like Relativity One or the CS Disco or the like. They are really kind of expensive solutions, and so we do find that there's the question of where do we put all this discovery data or all the production data. iManage really isn't meant for it, and neither is Net Documents. Both of them have some limitations with files such as viewing video, for a good example. But we do find that on occasion you've got to save some items that that originated externally, and we should be prepared to accommodate that. I like to take a break here since we're really throwing a lot of information at you and just talk a little bit about the frequent changes and the new features that have come to the document management system space. In there, we see a lot of buzz about artificial intelligence. Um, and as technology partners or implementation partners, we also see we're involved in discussion with these vendors about what is on the roadmap and what's coming down the pipe. And we stay on top of it as best we can. I know that Net Documents and iManage both released, if not to general, but to a preview or beta channel, and notified partners about Pattern Builder for Net Documents, which can leverage AI integration, as well as a share space migrator tool, which allowed some control over document preview options. That is an AI bolstered offering from Net Documents. iManage in Q2 shared their product roadmap with us, and they also introduced a feature for bulk security updates, which is really nice. That's in Cloud iManage, which is their more modern one. Earlier clouds went to iManage.work, and I don't believe they've gotten that feature yet. Those bulk security updates really do streamline items and setting ACLs and access for different workspaces, and it's very nice. Net Documents also added in 4.0 the ability to import folders from the client, full folder structures, so that certainly gives them an edge. AI specifically has gotten a lot of attention in our field. And in November 16th of last year, the California State Bar had released a practical guidance for the use of generative AI in the practice of law. So in there, there's a confidentiality clause that's very interesting. I encourage everyone to read it. It really does also outline that you should be before implementing these technologies or using these technologies, it recommends that you reach out to a certified information technology specialist to assess the security of the offering, which we've done on multiple occasions now. Additionally, we've seen some integrated saves and serverless automation workflows as a big trend. I think, well, AI might dither and find its own correction in the market. Serverless workflows are starting to become the new normal. We're starting to see business intelligence systems kind of replace and API-based technology really replace the traditional server and client relationship, which is expensive and costs a lot of infrastructure to host. So automation of users, automation of workspaces can now be done without a server in most environments, with some caveats. We're also seeing sorting, filtering, viewing enhancements as a trend. So both the major two are trying to make their systems more user-friendly and easier to navigate. As well as we're seeing some improvements in the technical functions for propagating that metadata down to documents and folders or into folders from or into subfolders from parent folders with bulk security inheritance and some interactive dialogues that will guide users through how to do that on each system. And Net Documents uses drag and drop profile attributes to get the same thing. Any questions on those? All right. So getting back to our presentation, now that we've talked about our Matter intake process, a little bit about client intake, what metadata is and how it works in a DMS system, as well as some of those pitfalls to avoid and some of our do's and don'ts. let's apply it to the journey of a document that gets saved to these systems. Um, you know, the first thing that we have is intake, right? So as we touched on, if that intake process isn't completed in a timely manner, it introduces risk. What is that risk and how do we mitigate it? Well, for one, that risk could be saving outside of the DMS. Sometimes that means the document is staying in email, where only one person can see it as an attachment. Other times, it means it's being saved to the desktop, which is the same effect. Um, there may be, what we see often is kind of a file share that's out there on a file server where a professional can save those documents and other people could have access to it. A downside is it's not very great for collaboration. Um, one person might have that document open and editing, and another person can't quite see that it's being opened and edited. You might have multiple versions saved locally versus that file server, and that's going to introduce some edit confusion. You know, which version is came first, which version came after, which one has the changes from attorney A, and which one has the changes from paralegal B. Um, so another issue is lack of search in those file shares unless they are organized and approved for use and documented. You may find users who are creating those folders themselves, naming it different things. Maybe they don't have access to the billing system or it hasn't been assigned, or they were asked to do this task and didn't have the client intake form. They may name it shorthand and abbreviation that nobody else is aware of for this new client or this new matter. And that's going to make it even harder to find. On top of that, searching through Windows File Explorer, not very user-friendly. It takes a long time. So everything here we're looking at a loss of productivity, a general state of confusion and frustration, and the risk of duplicated data, which can incur storage costs, which gets very expensive. Another item that we have here is if your profiling isn't set up in an intuitive way that matches your workflows, um, uh, the documents that you had in your kind of ad hoc folders in your file share or in your email or locally may be hard to identify where to put once that matter is open. So if you don't have profiling set up in the DMS or you're using a file share that doesn't support it or a system that doesn't support it, then it's not going to be easy to locate, organize by matter, or have that type of visibility you need to have when we expect our professionals to be able to get a task, find the document, complete the work, and move on to the next thing. Um, I think one story I had here was that our temporary, I think here it was, the firm that I worked with acquired another firm, a much smaller firm, and they were using SharePoint for their or for their DMS system. And SharePoint has its specific use case, and for smaller firms, you do see it sometimes used as a document repository, but it had no metadata really associated with those documents. What ended up happening was the firm administrator worked with a separate vendor to do a migration over to net documents, and in doing so, they were tasked with matching up every single folder in SharePoint with the associated client matter number in the billing system. When the migration came to pass, hundreds of folders with gigabytes of documents in them did not make it into the system before go live because that work was pieced out and given to people who were already had a full 40 hours of work planned and weren't able to tag it according to the instructions in time for that migration. So on the day of go live, people were, half of the people were in the new system, half the people were in SharePoint, and it made their workflow kind of hectic for the next few weeks. So we always do recommend um, that if we are moving from something that's flat and doesn't have metadata, that each item is matched and we have a design phase where you could work with your migration engineer to map all of those individual metadata fields, especially client and Matter, with the respective folder, and every single document underneath those gets metadata applied to it at the time of ingestion. In this case, some other dangers of using file share is the long folder path and limitations. So Windows in general has a 255 character limit for documents in its File Explorer or saved to file shares in a server. That limit is not usually shared by a DMS system outside of traditional Windows. What ends up happening is you have a folder that fails or a file path that's really deep. People are putting super long names in it. This is the motion to suppress arbitrary agreement from opposition counsel in May of 2023, right? And that kind of extends way past a specific parent folder. And when you go to import that, it fails and it says, hey, Windows can't move this file. So those have to be shortened and kind of condensed into, sometimes that's renamed, sometimes it's moved to a different system before it gets uplifted. But having that ability for people to create folders as they need and name them whatever they want can sometimes have unintended consequences down the road when you go to modernize your system. And long folder paths is one of them. Additionally, um, we have use cases for those file shares. While there is a risk, sometimes it's the best solution for a period of time, and there should be documented procedures for when to use it, when not to use it, and who's going to go back and clean it up after, right? According to your retention policies. What's the use case for a file share? Well, sometimes you will have temporary data not related to a case that you have to collaborate or to store somewhere. That data is not going to make it up to your document management system unless it's administrative and you need to retain it and use it for some time. In that case, it may be, and speaking in general terms there, but in that case, it may be beneficial to place that on a SharePoint or another system since it doesn't hold work product and it's not related to an active case. Additionally, if there are delays in matter intake process and you're working to sort those out as a temporary measure, or it's not possible to save within your DMS, you could use a file share for that, but you want to find a way to mitigate those risks and to make users aware of the risk so that they are able to mitigate that themselves. Additionally, there's e-discovery data, large document productions. They come in zip folders. Sometimes there could be a forensic hold on them, and I think SharePoint or a file share, I'd put SharePoint above with some data loss prevention policies above a file share, but is a place to put e-discovery data as well if you don't have a solution intended for that use. And then lastly, there's unsupported file types. So there are some items that you can't open in like NAT documents or iManage, like MP4 videos, CAD drawings, proprietary applications, archives of web pages are another big one I see, usually related to production data, or even certain image types. Although most do support like TIFF images and PDFs that we see, it may not support, you know, images that got pulled from an iPhone and have a bunch of little moving slides, for example. Uh, moving on to our common pitfalls. Um, what are some items that will introduce risk or errors and add time and cost to a migration or to your everyday usage of a document management system? One of which is flat space documents. So these are documents which are not organized by a client or matter, that are not tagged with any data outside of their title and maybe their author and operator. In this case, it's going to take manual review to decide where to put these documents by somebody at some time. Generally speaking, when I see this in a migration, I try my best to line it up based on what information is available to me. But if you have a lot, we're probably going to recommend that it goes into a misfiled matter folder or a misfiled items folder to be reviewed by a professional inside of the firm. Um, that being said, there have been plenty of cases where I had 400,000 documents that we were able to map with maybe 60,000 that we needed some client intake on. And from there, we would map them together and put them in their proper place. And then we get down to only a handful that need to be put in the misfiled for minimal review. That being said, it is the most common error I see migrating from one system into a cloud system is these documents don't have the metadata I need to organize them, or they just exist out there in the middle of nowhere. The second most common error I see is special or unsupported characters. So especially the EM dash, curly quotes, tabs. So of no fault of their own, we'll say a legal assistant is saving a document to your legacy DMS, and they just copied and pasted the document or the name of the client. They want to make sure that they get it right, and so they use the document name or the client name or the document name exactly as it is in some other source. And what happens there is there might be a curly quote, there might be a EM dash, and those characters are encoded differently from your everyday letters. Like on a keyboard, they're encoded with UTF-8, and most systems don't support that in all fields. It can cause errors in searching and in reviewing the database. And if they do exist inside of the database, it's going to be a long string of numbers or just a little square that doesn't display and doesn't load. So in the event that there are special characters or unsupported characters in a file name, those all have to be addressed at the time of migration. Even if you're transitioning from imanage.work to imanage.cloud, an engineer is going to have to script a solution in order to address all of those. And if that person is me, I'm going to be asking, what would you like us to replace this character with in all of these cases? Do you want me to delete it outright? Would you like a space? Would you like an underscore? Should I do straight quotes every time I find a curly? And then I'm going to script that solution, automate it so someone doesn't have to sit there and rename everything to the keyboard. Um, Additionally, we'll sometimes find documents that are tagged improperly with manually typed information. This is metadata that doesn't exist in your database. Maybe from an older system that allowed people to type their own and didn't validate it. I won't name any system names, but I've seen it quite a few times. Uh, and they may put AGRE and agreement is just AGR. That gets saved. And at the time of dealing with these systems or searching for this item, it doesn't come up because that E is missing or that E is added. Another item I come across all the time is leading zeros. So generally speaking, a firm is looking to plan for the future and they say, we want all of our client numbers to be 5 characters. We want to be able to support, multiple clients and we plan on growing. And that 5-character limit's going to get us there. But what do you do when you have a 5-character field and you're starting at 1? Well, you add 4 zeros in front of it. What I see happen a lot is that the billing system might do that, but the DMS system doesn't. And so when you go to map or to match these two systems together, so you have a single source of truth, and that the metadata or the documents are easy to find when you go from one system to the next, the leading zero causes a false positive and you get duplicate data. So if you do have leading zeros, you've got to take it into account when you are designing a DMS system or migrating to a new platform for that reason. Um, One thing that we want to do is avoid over engineering the solution when we're creating a solution. A lot of the times an IT person or a designer might say, this feature is the best. It's going to save you so much time. People are going to love it. And when you actually get it in front of the people who you want to use it, they say, I'm never touching that. You know, it seems like a pain to learn. I'm not going to look at that anymore. So uh, keep in mind that everybody's needs are different. And even if you create something beautiful or you put a lot of effort into one specific item, it might not get any use. So check with the people, have these communications with the partners in charge of the practice areas, with the people who are making the decisions for each department inside of the firm and say, does this have value to you? Can I get your input on this organization? How's this folder structure? Would it work for your day to day? Why or why not? So we can come to an understanding and make sure that what we're doing is actually relevant to the people we're trying to help. Um, Another best practice we see here is setting common formats. I see it from one firm to the next. These types of formats are usually interchangeable if there's not some variation, and one of those is the client matter format or the workspace name. A lot of the times in a matter-centric environment, the first part is going to have the client number dot matter number. Sometimes this is a hyphen. Sometimes it's a underscore. Sometimes it's a period, but generally it's going to start there. I also see a lot of firms that move that to the end of the name in a workspace. So it might have the client description, ABC company, matter description, company acquisition, and then you have a hyphen and or just parentheses and the client and matter number. And very, very common. Sometimes it's just a case name. Sometimes it's just a case name and a case description. Other times there is the partner in charge. Very, very rare. I think the most common format is including the client description, the matter description, and the client matter number in the name, and especially starting kind of left to right. Additionally, you will see a lot of templates um, across different firms, such as the general template, but I see most common, I think, litigation, estate planning, real estate, transactional. Those ones, generally speaking, when I'm going into an environment for the first time, I'm looking for those kind of five. That may say more to the types of firms I work with than what the best practice is for the entire standard. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that your templates are working for each one of your departments. And we're going to see that reflected in the system. Um, Personal workspaces we see very often. That's where each user in the firm who's creating a work product is going to have their own workspace where they can save items as opposed to just placing it on their local desktop. And that way they have version history, they have auditing, and they have the ability to share that document with others. A lot of the times I see a private folder for them and a public folder for documents that maybe they're not ready to move into a case or aren't related to an actual ongoing case, but they want to collaborate with another person on it. Um, the most common client I see there is something with a bunch of nines on it, like 99999, and then a different matter number per user. Additionally, every firm needs to have a place to save a document that's being worked on, and that's when we see, or that's imported and they're not sure of where it's supposed to go yet or what that document will become. And we do see a to be profiled or to be filed folder very often in different workspaces. And then lastly, search folders. I see them all the time as prefixed by a underscore. And that's kind of a legacy thing now, but it was so they went to the top of the list. I do still see it used, but for systems like NetDocuments, you can organize which folder goes where, and kind of get that structure where you want it. So you don't have to rely on an underscore all the time, but it is common, especially with firms who've been around a long time. Lastly, some common oversights. I know that manual SQL jobs can be missed when we're working on these things. What that means is at some point, an engineer, technician, administrator went through the database and said, I'm going to create a custom solution, and it's not documented anywhere. And then if it's not caught before you are moving your data or selecting a new DMS system, it can really bite you. Make sure that you have an engineer who's going to look at those things as well, because they will have to be redesigned if they're not supported in your new system. User provisioning can be missed often. What do we do for a new user? Who creates those new users, and how do we tell them how to continue once we make a change to the system? And then admin access. Usually I see there are a lot more admins in a place than is really necessary. And we want to make sure that we're not giving a lot of people the rights to accidentally delete a lot of information. So we do generally trim that down and decide who needs access to what, and how much they need to do their job, and then assign that type of access. And that concludes our DMS best practices, and we're on to our Q&A portion. If you have any questions you've been holding in, if you would like to share your stories, your anecdotes, or pick our brains here on the call, you're more than welcome to. And I do want to thank everyone who was able to make it here at our 11 a.m. hour. And for your patience. I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope that you found some value in it. Oh, thank you, Michaela. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate your support here.
Well, great. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks all for jumping on and attending. We'll follow up with a note just to make sure that we're thinking about you, and obviously to see if there's any questions. I think Mary Kay just asked a question.
Oh, she'd like the recording. And
Yeah, you could certainly send that out, Mary Kay. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We'll definitely do that as the follow-up as well. So appreciate the time, everybody. Ryan, great job as usual, and we'll be in touch shortly. Thanks all.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well done, Ryan.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
Take care all. Thank you.
Thanks.